Chapter 29. Testing, testing. Sean wanted to say the words out loud and hear the reassuring confirmation that he was getting through. The glitch with the phone on the train had dented his confidence in MI5's electronics. But he was sitting next to Heaton in the Impreza, crawling slowly at the tail end of the evening rush hour, on the way to a rendezvous with madmen. He was being forced to trust again. Trust them to have set up the wire correctly, trust himself to have turned it on right. It was a neat device, a gadget the size of a credit card sewn into the inside of his shirt. The microphone was one of his buttons. It meant that if he got searched, if he had to take his shirt off, then it wouldn't be like the movies where the guy always has trailing leads in an incriminating box taped to his stomach. But it was still there. It was still discoverable if he got careless. It seemed appropriate that the gadget lay more or less over his heart. Whenever it brushed against his skin and reminded him of its presence, it felt like a great big target saying, "Shoot me now." Heaton had picked him up, as promised, but it hadn't been for a drink. They had headed straight for the A303 in London. Rich had summoned them again. Heaton had headed for the M25, and they'd circled London anti-clockwise before coming off. They were now somewhere near Peckham. After numerous stop-start traffic lights and junctions, Heaton turned into an ordinary-looking light industrial estate. It looked pretty new, with nice shiny metal surfaces to all the units. He drove slowly, looking at the numbers painted on the front faces of the units. There was only one with cars parked up outside, and sure enough, that was where he stopped. Sean instinctively scanned the vehicles. The top-of-the-range Jaguar XC, a much more modest Mondeo, and a Yamaha motorbike. This is it. Heaton switched off the engine. Front line of the war. You mean, Sean couldn't help saying, front line to a tidy profit? Heaton grinned and shrugged. Demand's going to shoot up, mate. Someone's got to supply it. What's next, then? Sean asked as they got out for the benefit of the microphone. Making casual conversation with Heaton was almost impossible without wanting to simultaneously throw up and kick the shit out of him. But at least trying to gather intelligence made talking easier, and he could only hope it brought forward the time when MI5 had everything they needed to come in with all guns blazing. He pushed his door shut. The Impreza beeped as it locked itself. Heaton grinned. The big one, Harker. Exciting times. The unit had a large sliding shutter for vehicles, now closed up, and a smaller door to one side for people. Sean took a deep breath and followed Heaton through this one. Inside, the space was occupied by 4 large, long-wheelbase transit vans, parked facing the shutter. White, no signage. Beyond them was an office. Shouldn't have surprised Sean, but still his heart sank at the sight of Malcolm waiting outside. The Doberman indicated with a jerk of his head that they should go through. "Come in, dear lads, come in." As they entered with Malcolm hot on Sean's heels, Rich turned away from the 2 other men. Sean stopped dead when he saw who the company was. They stood there with big grins on their faces, and Sean wanted to kill them both, even while he went into acting mode and shook Rich's outstretched hand. "I believe you know these 2 gentlemen?" "Copper, Matt," Sean said with a nod. He wanted to say more. He wanted to say, "What the fuck do you think you're doing getting involved in this bullshit? And are you fucking mental?" And lots of other stuff too. He wanted to lay into them, beat the crap out of them, kick them out of the unit and all the way back to the petty crime that kept them occupied back on their own turf. "Surprise, eh, Shawnee?" said Copper, and gave him a big man hug that almost cracked a rib. Matt gave him a fist bump. Sean nodded, still fighting the urge to punch their faces for being such tossers. "If Gaz could see us now, eh?" Matt murmured with a wink. Sean had to stuff his fists into his pocket so that the urge to use them didn't overwhelm him. "Yeah," he managed to say. "Good, good," said Rich. "Shall we get on?" "Sure," Sean said. "Tell us about the big one." Rich cocked an eyebrow at him and he froze inside, keeping the smile plastered on his face Oh, shit. Had that been too eager? Had he aroused suspicions? All in good time. Rich waved a hand over to one corner of the unit. There was a screen there, and a pile of DVDs and some beanbags. For the moment, food will be arriving shortly, and there is enough there to keep you gentlemen entertained for the night. You'll be sleeping here. Tomorrow is, as Mr. Harker puts it, the big one. Yeah, but what is it? Matt asked. Now he was the recipient of the cocked eyebrow. It is something that will cause terror and chaos, stretching far beyond London itself. This will be world news. The media frenzy will be enormous. People will at last realize they are not safe at home. They will demand changes. I'm not talking about a revolution, nothing so grand. Just sensible laws to protect law-abiding folk and suppress undesirables. A little less democracy and considerably more investment in our armed forces. Soldiers on the streets to protect us. Hey, Sean, Matt said. You might get to be a useful member of society after all. He and Copper high-fived each other. Why? Sean wanted to shake them and scream the question in their faces, though he could already have a go at guessing the answers. Heaton, for the profit and for himself, like he had just said. Copper, because he was messed up and this was messed up and people who weren't him would suffer and die. But Matt had always had a calmer head than Copper. Copper must have recruited him and made him think that there was something in it for the guys. In the world that Rich wanted to create, the guys could fly high. Before we go any further, Rich said, I believe Mr. Harker has a phone call to make? Suddenly it was like the air conditioning had come on full blast. Sean felt the blood drain from his face and the moisture from his mouth. Fuckety, fuckety, fuck, fuck, fuck. I do? He whispered. He barely made any sound, and he had to cough and force volume out of his throat for another try. I do? He was conscious of 5 pairs of eyes all trained on him like lasers. How did they know about the phone? And if they knew, how was he still alive? You will all be spending the night here, Rich said, as though explaining something to a child. You can't just go AWOL from the army. They will ask questions. Corporal Heaton has already booked a day's leave for tomorrow on my instructions, but you need to call the adjutant and tell him that your mother has been taken ill, so you need to request emergency leave. The sheer gush of relief made Sean's heart thump so loudly that he wondered no one could hear it. It was backed up by an equally strong surge of revulsion at the thought of spending the night with these crazies. There was nothing he could do about it. MI5 wouldn't pick this lot up until they absolutely knew what was going down. Until that happened, he was still in it. Yeah, he smiled faintly. I'll make the call now. He pulled away, stepped out of the office and into the dim interior of the unit. Took 2 or 3 deep breaths. The air tasted of plastic and petrol, but it still seemed cleaner than what he'd been breathing. He sensed rather than heard a noise behind him. Malcolm stood in the doorway, watching. He silently extended a single finger and pointed to where Sean was standing. It was an obvious message that he was to go no further. So Sean pulled out the spook's phone and dialed. With a friendly smile at his watcher, it rang twice, and then he heard the unmistakable voice of Sergeant Adams on the other end. Yes? Hi, this is Private Harker. Sean rattled off his army number and gave Malcolm another smile. I need to speak to the adjutant's office. It's an emergency.